Hello, everyone. We are about a minute and a half away from starting our webinar today. Want to welcome all of you who took the time out of your day to join us. If you're here for Christine-Luken's wonderful presentation on money mistakes after divorce and widowhood, you are indeed in the right place. Hopefully you have a nice cup of coffee, and a beautiful cup like that. I wish I had some of these cups, but anyway, you have your coffee, you're all ready to go. For those of you who are new to GoToWebinar, please make the adjustments you need to make now in your control panel. For example, some of you might have issues with audio. You want to go into the audio section and select the correct audio for what you want to listen to. If you have headphones on and so forth, that's in there. Also, you can adjust your volumes and other things. You will also notice there is a question box, and we're going to say that if you have questions or observations or comments, please put them in the question box and I will relay those shortly to Christine. And if she wants to, she'll answer them. I don't know. But we'll at least tell her that you're on there. And also, there are other boxes there for chat. If you need to ask me specifically a question, you can go into chat. So again, I want to thank you for being on the webinar. Even though you will hear a lot of references to financial services and insurance and the CFPs and things like that, if you're on here and you're on here just because you're a woman and you're concerned about these issues, well, you are still going to get a lot out of this presentation, and I encourage you to check out all of Christine's other materials for you. For those of you who don't know me, and there are several new people on today, and I want to thank you for joining us again. Tammy de Leeuw, I am now the marketing therapist. Christine, I took a page from your book.
I love
Christine is the financial lifeguard. And I'm the marketing therapist because what I really do is look at what people have, business owners, what they have now in place, and kind of diagnose what needs to be done without telling them to buy every new and shiny thing that comes out there. You know, you may not have to, right? It's like having a leak in your bathtub. That may mean you have a little pipe issue, or it may mean you need a whole new tub, but you don't need to necessarily throw everything out. So I am the marketing therapist. I finally have a website after 20 years of doing this, or almost 20 years. People bugged me because I never maintained my site, Christine, so I let it go to the wayside because I was too busy. No, I was too busy doing stuff for people. Now I have yourmarketingtherapist.com. I'm working on it still, so don't tell me there are pages that aren't finished, because I know. If you want to get in touch with me about any of these marketing issues and things that come up, or if you just forget some of this webinar and you want to know where to see it again, call 951-658-0492, coming at you from the lovely and getting ready to be extremely hot Inland Empire here in Southern California. The best way to contact me, though, if you just need a session, if you want a free analysis of your marketing, go to calendly.com/Tammy de Leeuw. This is what I do because people ask me all the time, including my husband and my daughter. They ask me, Christine, what do I do? And I don't know exactly what to tell them. Ghostwriting, obviously I do webinars, ghostwriting, copywriting, email campaigns. I specialize, of course, in the financial and insurance industry because I am still a licensed agent here in California. We do health, small business, lifestyle, podcasts, you name it. If I can't personally do it, I have people in my small circle of friends that can do it for you. So my goal, Christine, and you would agree that this is a good thing because Christine-Luken has done this very well. It's to get you a little bit famous in your niche or your geographic area, and then your business will grow. You don't have to be like Dave Ramsey, where everybody knows you. You just have to be famous in your area, and that's my goal. So if you're here today or you're watching the replay of this webinar, I'm hoping it's because you provide financial services to women clients and you want to understand women better and serve them better and reach out to them because they think totally differently than you guys do. We do. You would like more women clients. You're an advisor who realizes that women they hold the purse strings now, and you would like more women clients. Or you are a woman, maybe you're a business owner, maybe you're going through a divorce, or you've been recently widowed, and you'd like to know what Christine is doing to help women like you avoid making serious financial mistakes during or after divorce or separation, or after becoming a widow. And these are really stressful times. And Christine's going to talk about some of the mistakes people make with their money because they're just under so much pressure. So, CFPs, there are several of you on the call. Be sure that we have your correct information, and Christine will explain to you how you're going to get your CE credit for today's presentation. So I'm going to turn it over. So you've entered the black void now. Da 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 da. I'm going to make Christine the presenter, and this will take we'll do 30 or 40 minutes of information, and then again, type in your questions and I will relay them to her. Without further ado, introduce yourself, Christine. Tell them who you are and just a little bit about how you started doing this.
I will, and actually that's a slide or two in, but yes, my name is Christine-Luken. I am known as the financial lifeguard, and today we're going to be talking about emotional money mistakes that are common during divorce and widowhood. And today, here is what you are going to learn. And you're probably going to want to take some notes. I'm going to be dropping some serious knowledge on you guys. You're going to discover the 3 most common money mistakes that clients make during divorce.
Excuse me 1 second.
Yes.
I don't know if your screen is showing to everybody. Did you hit show my screen?
Oh, I thought I did. Let me go back.
Okay. All right. No, it's okay. I got it. I think everybody can see it now. So
can
there
you
we
see
go.
it?
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. Okay, so we are going to discover the 3 most common money mistakes that clients make during divorce. You're going to gain an understanding of the stages of grief so you can recognize your client's emotional state and guide them to make good financial choices. And you're also going to discover 2 big emotional money mistakes that your clients might make during widowhood. And CFPs, there will be a quiz for your CE credit. So we will give you that link. We'll also send it in the follow-up email. And I highly encourage you to take this quiz for your CE credit as soon as possible while everything is fresh in your mind. I promise it's really pretty easy. It's just to make sure you've been paying attention. I think it's only 5 questions. So I am Christine-Luken, the financial lifeguard. I am the founder of the Financial Dignity Movement. I'm a certified divorce specialist and financial counselor with 13 years of experience coaching individuals and single women. I'm an active member of the Financial Therapy Association and author of multiple books, including Money is Emotional: Prevent Your Heart from Hijacking Your Wallet. And I've also experienced the stress and heartache that come from the breakup of a long-term relationship. I jokingly say it was my almost divorce because I almost got married to the wrong guy. So a lot of these things that I'm talking about, I personally experienced myself. So I understand not just the theory, but I understand by experience what women especially are going through during some of these difficult times. So during death and divorce, emotions are on overdrive. Clients who are in the throes of divorce or reeling from the shock of loss of a spouse might exhibit behaviors around money that don't seem to make sense to you at all. And there actually is a term called divorce brain because it is processed like a trauma. Of the top 3 most stressful events that anyone can go through, death of a spouse and divorce are the top 2. In case you're wondering what number 3 is, it's a major move, usually across country. But when one of these events happen, it's a trauma. And what you have to understand, even with divorce, if that person is choosing it, it's still traumatic. It is a major upheaval in their life. So even if they are choosing the divorce, or if they agree that it is the best choice in the long run, they are still going to experience these kinds of emotions. Now, It's very helpful to understand what is driving people's decisions. And one of my pet peeves is when financial professionals tell their clients to just leave emotions out of their financial decision making. Because when we do this, we're actually asking our clients to do something that's physically impossible. So, science has recently proven that the moment of decision happens in the same part of the brain that processes emotion. And in fact, they were working with a group of stroke patients who had damage only in the part of the brain that processed emotions. And they found out that these people had an extremely hard time making even the simplest decisions, like what to eat for lunch. So, for us to say, just leave your emotions out of it, that's fantasy. Now, the good news is we can understand these emotional drivers and we can help our clients to harness the power of emotions to make better decisions. And we can actually teach them some techniques to dampen some of these negative emotions and or give them a productive outlet. So that way we're not damaging our financial situation. It's helpful to understand that people typically take action to either avoid pain or increase pleasure. And usually, avoiding pain is a stronger driver of behavior. So, when you see someone who is doing something or insisting on a course of action with their finances that you would deem illogical or irrational, or maybe you're just thinking, this is stupid. Why does this person want to do this? Think of that and say, okay, are they saying this or are they considering this course of action because there's some kind of pain or discomfort that they're trying to avoid? So sometimes we need to dig a little bit deeper under the surface for these reasons to become apparent. And it is vitally important, and I'm probably going to say this more than once, that when you have clients who are going through divorce or who have recently been widowed, that they have some kind of emotional and mental health resources. So whether that is seeing a therapist, a counselor, or being part of some kind of support group, I would love it if every single financial professional had relationships with people in the mental health industry so that they could immediately make a referral for these clients. And many of your clients may have these resources available through their employer. So many traditional employers have what's called an employee assistant program. And many times there are free counseling sessions that someone has access to after a major life event. Or their health insurance may cover some of these things as well. So it's very important that you just ask your client, hey, are you part of a support group? Are you seeing a counselor or a therapist? Because dealing with these emotional issues in a constructive way will help to ensure that they don't pop up into the financial part of their lives and wreak havoc. Let's talk first about understanding the stages of grief. Both divorce and death of a spouse, it involves loss, whether it's the physical loss of a long-term partner or the loss of the marriage relationship. And sometimes it's just the loss of their vision for the future as well. And sometimes we have situations where there are multiple losses. So, for example, a couple years ago, I was coaching a divorcing woman, and she owned a business with her husband. He initiated the divorce because he was actually having an affair with one of their employees that worked for the business. And so the husband decided that he wanted to keep the family home and buy her out. He also wanted to buy her out of the business. He also said that while they were separated, before the divorce was final, he would go ahead and pay her salary that she was making at the business, but he didn't want her to come to work. So my client was dealing simultaneously with 3 losses. The top two of the big 3, the loss of her home, right? She had to move. She had raised all of her 6 children in this house, and now suddenly she was being asked to move out. The loss of her job, right? So even though she had that income and she knew that she was going to get a big settlement, if you think about it, many times when someone is going through a loss like this in their family, the people at work are like a secondary family to us many times. And having that place to go, that place of normalcy, right? Where you can forget what a freaking disaster your home life is for a few hours and be around people who are friends, and some of them like family. At least hopefully that's the kind of workplace environment that your clients are finding themselves in. And she really loved the people that she worked with, and so this was really hard, right? She was losing her marriage, losing her work family, and having to move out of the home that she had lived in for 18 years. So these things may actually come out even more so when we have multiple losses. Now, your client might go through some or all of the stages of grief in any order, and they can return to various stages depending on what they're experiencing. So the first stage is denial. And this model of grief is known as the Kubler-Ross model of grief. You might have heard that before if you've taken any psychology classes. And so with denial, your client might refuse to accept the fact that the loss has happened. They might minimize or even deny the situation. This is someone who just doesn't want to deal with it. And they might be in shock, right? Maybe they are not the one who initiated the divorce, and they just need some time to process because it doesn't feel like it's real. And I'll be honest with you, when my parents told my brother and I, when we were teenagers, that they were getting divorced, we honestly thought they were joking, because I feel like I grew up in the Brady Bunch household and my parents never fought in front of us. And it literally took a full month for the truth of the matter to sink in, like, this is really happening. Now, if you have a client in this situation, depending on what is going on in their finances, there may be some moves that they need to make financially, whether it is because their spouse has passed away and we need to start moving some assets, or if separation has been filed, there may be beneficiaries that need to be changed, things of that nature. The best response is the truth delivered with compassion, right? We can't deny that this is going on. And also be aware that if something doesn't need to happen immediately, then you may not want to press the issue, right? You might just want to deal with the things that absolutely need to be dealt with the time at hand. Now, the second stage is anger. This is when someone is saying, like, why is this happening to me? This is unfair. Your client might become angry. They might be angry with themselves. They might be angry with others, their soon-to-be ex. They might even be angry with God, especially if it was the loss of their spouse. They might argue that the situation is unfair and blame others. And so we're going to talk about how to have some healthy release of anger a little bit later. So the third stage is bargaining. So sometimes this is also called negotiating. And there's kind of like two ways to look at this stage. So some people say that this is where your client might be trying to change or delay the loss. So they could be trying to convince their spouse to return after a breakup, even if there's an unhealthy dynamic in the relationship. So that's sort of like the unhealthy part of this stage. But the healthy part of the bargaining / negotiating stage is that, especially with divorce, that they are willing to enter into discussions about how to move forward. Whether that is talking about things like spousal support, child support, shared parenting, etc. Now, depression. This is when the person recognizes and mourns their loss. Your client might isolate themselves and spend time crying and grieving. Now, please note that this is a normal part of the grieving process, and this is not necessarily clinical depression. So, clinical depression is when someone is feeling very sad. They're, ignoring the rest of life. They feel very hopeless. They don't have any energy for a sustained period. So this is where they are in that state for most of the day for 2+ weeks straight. And one of the things that I always recommend for any financial professional is to take a suicide awareness / prevention training. There's one called QPR, which is question, persuade, refer. So if you just look up QPR suicide training online, I want to say it's like maybe $20. It is really, really good. And, this is not for you to talk people through or talk them out of their depression. It's like the equivalent of CPR, right? If you think about, if you learn CPR, the reason why you do it is if you see somebody who is critical, you can intervene and keep them alive until they get help. That's exactly what this QPR training does, except for mental health. And, if you are helping someone go through this process of, dealing with a widow or dealing with divorce, if you at least understand the warning signs, then you can steer them to the proper help when they need it, hopefully before they get to that dangerous point. So the fifth and final stage is acceptance. Now, notice it's not happiness, it's acceptance. Your client accepts their loss, they understand the situation logically, and they've come to terms with it emotionally. Now, like I said, they might not necessarily be happy about the situation, but they are engaging in their life and they are taking steps to move forward. Now, when you have someone who is going through divorce or who is a widow, they might be handling money for the first time. Now, I'm talking a lot about women here, but sometimes this can also be the case for men. I have coached some divorcing men who were married to women who were financial professionals, whether they were financial planners or, accountants, etc. And they had never really handled the day-to-day finances. And so this can be a really stressful time for someone who is going through this. It's like an extra layer of stress, whereas the person who was always handling the finances, yes, there might be some stress about how the divorce is going to affect them financially, but they're not stressed out about tracking their spending or paying the bills or communicating with their financial planner, because they've been doing that all along. But many times the financial chores are usually not split 50-50. in a relationship. Usually one person is taking the lead. So if your client hasn't been handling the money, then they may have this extra layer of stress. And it is definitely more common with women who didn't work outside the home during the marriage. They're likely feeling ashamed or embarrassed that they don't know what to do. And this can lead to your clients withdrawing and not wanting to face financial issues head on because they don't want to look stupid, right? So, what are some warning signs where that can kind of give you this red flag that even though they haven't come out and said, I didn't handle the money or I don't know how to do this, because they're embarrassed to even say it, here's some things to look for. If they are largely silent during your conversation, it may not, silence is not necessarily agreement. They might not really know what to say, or they might pretend to know what you're saying, or this look of confusion on their face. And sometimes we just need to stop and say, you know, do you understand what we need to do going forward? Is this something, that you're comfortable doing? Do you need help with this? And it doesn't necessarily need to be you that's helping them. You might refer them to somebody else, to an accountant or to a bookkeeper or a financial coach to help them with things like that. But if they don't have the basics of personal finance down, and you're trying to help them manage and understand their investments, then, if they don't understand the basics, they're definitely not going to understand the advanced stuff. Also, if they just have blanket agreement, so if you're explaining different things and they're like, oh, sure, yeah, and they act like they're agreeing with everything, you may want to ask some clarifying questions to make sure that they really are understanding. So how can you help them? When interacting with your client, we want to avoid jargon. And I know this is hard for us in the financial professions because there's so many different acronyms and things that we think are basic, our clients may not know. And so when we start talking about things like 403Bs and Roth IRAs, we assume that everybody knows what we're talking about, and that may not necessarily be the case. We also want to encourage them to ask questions. We want to be patient and offer additional resources to help them with their financial literacy. And so if this is your client and they have never really handled their finances in the past, I've written a great book that is good for really any stage. It talks about the emotional side of money, but it also talks about the practical side of personal finance, and it's called Money is Emotional. Prevent your heart from hijacking your wallet. And so if you have a client that needs a basic financial literacy education, that's a wonderful resource that you can point them to. And the Kindle version is less than $10, right? And this client might need more handholding when it comes to daily money management. This might be the person that needs help with setting up online banking access or automatic bill payment or some kind of spending tracker or budget app. Not saying that you need to be the person to set that up, but just so you know, I'm connected in a group with over 5,000 financial coaches in all parts of the country. And there are financial coaches that will help people do that. There's also such a thing as daily money managers that will come in, especially to help with maybe elderly people who are not as tech savvy, and they can come in and actually help with those weekly and monthly tasks of helping people pay their bills. So I like to say that money is like the third person in your client's relationship. money was intertwined with many of the interactions that they had with their spouse. And even though your client is now single, she or he and money are still together forever. And that relationship needs to be healed. How money was handled in their previous relationship will affect their current and future behavior if it's left unexamined. So, a conversation opener for divorcing clients might just be, tell me about the money disagreements in your marriage. Or for widowed clients, tell me how money was handled in your marriage. This might uncover common money issues such as emotional spending, disagreements over savings goals, or lack of communication around finances. And it could potentially uncover more serious financial trauma, such as financial infidelity, secret keeping, or controlling behaviors. I was really shocked to hear that in the case of physical abuse, when someone is in a physically abusive relationship, 98% of those relationships had some sort of financial abuse or financial control, where the other person was limiting or restricting or preventing that person from accessing their own money. And so that's just something to be aware of. So you can drop more details by saying, tell me more about that. And, if a client is being unreasonable or stubborn or overly anxious about a financial matter, then sometimes it just helps to peel back the layers by saying, tell me why this is important to you. So if someone, they don't want to sell a particular asset that you feel like, hey, this has run its life cycle, it's best for us to get out of this and get into something else, and they don't want to budge, just saying, tell me why this is important to you. It may uncover something that you had no idea. And if you didn't ask that question, you wouldn't know. And there may be another way for you to, kind of preserve the thing that is important to them, but still make the right move with their money. So for example, I've heard financial planners say that sometimes people get emotionally attached to a particular stock because, their father worked for General Electric for 50 years, or, their late husband worked for Ford Motor Company for 40 years. And, you're looking at the stock and you're thinking, we need to get out of this while we can so I can help your money grow. And they refuse to do it. Saying something like, tell me why this is important to you, and you uncover that fact, then maybe you can say, well, hey, look, I respect the fact that, you want to honor your dad, or you want to honor your husband, or whatever the case may be. Maybe we can hang on to 10 shares just as a memorial to them, and then put the rest of the money over here, right? And we've still accomplished what we need to accomplish, and we've satisfied that emotional need with our client. All right, let's talk about some of these emotional landmines during divorce, because let me tell you, there's some doozies here. So the first one is using money as a weapon. This happens when your clients feel like they need to punish their soon-to-be ex-spouse, and maybe it's because the person was having an affair. Now, this can manifest as reckless spending, unreasonable demands, and acting from a place of anger. This is known as the fight response to danger. We want to remind our clients, their anger may be completely justified. And so it is, it's not productive for us to say, oh, don't be angry about that, or, screw them, who cares, we're moving on. We don't want to brush aside their feelings. We can say, hey, if I were you, I would be pissed off too. But then we want to remind our clients that the best revenge against their ex is their long-term success. Getting in that financial sucker punch might feel good right now, but it could hurt their financial situation in the long run. So, for example, one of my financial planner friends told me about one of his female clients who cashed out part of the 401k funds from her ex-husband. So she took $50,000 of the money out as an early withdrawal to buy a red convertible. He had cheated on her, and this was her way of getting quote unquote revenge on him. Spending his money on this little red Corvette. And, she would drop the kids off, every time she drove past his house. For her, it was like throwing it in his face that I've taken your money and I've bought something just for me. But this really boomeranged back on her because she ended up owing taxes and penalties on the early withdrawal. Plus, she didn't have nearly enough in her own retirement account to justify taking that out. And so, the financial planner, he's like, Christine, I tried. I just could not talk her out of it. But explaining like, hey, if we do this, if we take this $50,000 out, we've got to pay these taxes and this penalty. That's going to be X amount. Plus, show them the loss of potential growth over the next 10 years, over the next 20 years, based off of their current portfolio. Because sometimes showing them like, hey, if we take this $50,000 out now, 20 years from now, that means that you're going to have $500,000 less in this account. Is this car really worth it? Sometimes they need to see that in black and white. So we want to find our clients some productive outlets for anger and frustration. So I alluded before to, the stages of grief, when someone's going through that anger phase. I highly recommend physical activity. There are some awesome and fun physical activities that your clients can do that will help them to get out their frustrations, right? So whether it's something like taking a kickboxing class or some other kind of sport. For some reason here in the Cincinnati area, we've got a couple places where you can throw axes, like AX, like throw a
Not
chopping wood
X's,
X.
not X's, people. Axes.
No, we're not throwing our X's, we're throwing our axes. Or hey, maybe they want to go to the shooting range or something like that, or blow something up, right? Whatever they need to do to feel that physical outlet. For me, whenever I was mad, I loved hitting golf balls because I would just pretend that whoever was pissing me off, that their little face was on that golf ball, and I just whack the crap out of it. But having that physical outlet for anger can be just a really wonderful way to get that energy out.
I do angry gardening when I have a dispute with my spouse. That's, when I get in a dispute, I just do angry gardening. It's very interesting and therapeutic, but sometimes it's not so good for the plants.
I was going to say, weeds beware. Yes. But you know what? It is okay for your clients to spend a reasonable amount of money on themselves for a splurge or self-care after their divorce is final. But we just want to make sure that it fits into the overall spending plan. If this financial planner could have, discussed this with this woman, and maybe he could have convinced her, rather than buying this $50,000 car, maybe we just take $5,000 out and, you go on a vacation by yourself to Aruba, and meet some hot little pool boy, or, buy a designer purse or something like that. So, that doesn't mean that we can't have some sort of fun or reward, when someone gets a settlement or something like that. But we just want to make sure that they're not using the money as a weapon, because that's always a double-edged sword for your clients. Now, the opposite of this is giving away the store. So this happens when your client will agree to pretty much anything just to get the divorce behind them. And chances are they're tired of fighting, they dislike conflict and disagreement, and they just want to move on with their lives. Now, this was the situation that I was in. I had, a very negative relationship with my ex-fiance. I was so sick and tired of fighting that when we broke up, I did not insist that he pay his share of the debt that he helped me run up. His car was actually in my name under my insurance because he had had a DUI. Um, I had several people, including my counselor, say, you need to take that car and go sell it and use that money to pay off the debt. Well, I didn't. I left most of the furniture. I left a lot of things that after the fact, I wish I would have fought for. So, if your client doesn't stand up for themselves, they might receive less than their fair share, like I did, and regret it later. Now, you want to remind your clients that things like spousal and child support and visitation agreements, like all these things are very challenging to amend. So it's important not to rush this process. And these clients are exhibiting the flight response to stress, right? We talked about the fight response. Now this is the flight response. They want to run away. So we want to encourage our clients to be assertive and to stand up for themselves. Now, obviously, their divorce attorney should certainly be helping them with this during the process. And it's interesting because sometimes clients have a hard time advocating for themselves. So we may want to appeal to a higher cause. So, for example, if they don't receive a favorable financial agreement out of the divorce, there's going to be less money for them to spend on their kids, right? We all know that the sweetest woman on earth can turn into mama bear if you mess with her kids, right? So if we frame it in a way where we say, look, if X, Y, and Z doesn't happen and you are struggling, this is taking money out of your kids' pockets, not really out of your pocket, right? It's going to damage your ability to help and support your kids the way you want to. And you know what? Even if they don't have kids, they probably have a cause that's very important to them, whether that is, donating to an animal shelter, or maybe they have sponsored children in Nicaragua. You can say, look, every dollar that we don't get is one that you can't give to one of these causes that's important to you. And if we don't have all your needs met, then we may not be able to do this. So it's very interesting that sometimes clients who won't fight for themselves will actually fight for a higher cause. All right, so emotional landmine number 3 is the deer in the headlights. This happens when your client is paralyzed and unwilling or unable to take productive action. This is usually the result of your client feeling either overwhelmed or confused. And this is the freeze response to stress, and it can actually be worse than the fight or flight. Now, most clients who exhibit the freeze response, usually they didn't initiate the divorce. They might be in a state of shock or denial. And we want to remind them that by refusing to make a decision, that actually is a decision. Because sometimes if they delay making a choice, it may force them into an unfavorable course of action by default. So we want to find out if the deer in the headlights client is overwhelmed, number one, or are they confused? So if they're overwhelmed, we want to give them baby steps. Your client might only be able to handle one financial to-do at a time. And I know sometimes we think we are being productive and we think we are being helpful by sending our clients out of the office with a checklist of 12 things that they need to do to get their life in order and their finances in order. But for someone in that state, that just feels overwhelming and they won't do any of it. So sometimes it is much more beneficial to give them a very short list. And you can kind of prioritize and piecemeal that out to them as you need to in order for them to move forward with their financial life. If your client is confused, we want to determine exactly what they need to know and explain it as simply as possible. This client usually needs a higher degree of hand-holding from you. Now, if your client is traditionally employed, you definitely want to see if they have counseling benefits as part of their health insurance plan or their employee assistance program. This is usually free for them, and it can help them move through these emotions in a more productive way so that you are not playing their counselor, because that's not the point of this. The point of this is to guide them to make smart financial decisions now that they're going to be happy with later, and refer them to the appropriate mental health professionals if they need those resources. So what about widowhood? What are the most common mistakes that people make? It's usually the women. Women have usually outlive their husbands by 5 to 7 years. 80% of women will be 100% responsible for their financial situation at some point of their lives. And for many of them, that comes at widowhood. And it's a very vulnerable time for your client. And it's likely that well-meaning friends and family members will come forward to give them advice. And, most of these people they're very well-meaning. However, they usually don't have a complete picture of your client's money situation. So we want to caution them against making financial decisions without your input. And it's not because you want to control them, right? We want to make it clear that as your coach or as your advisor, my job is to look at the whole entire picture of your finances and help you to make decisions that are going to support the whole entire picture. So, sometimes they'll say, oh, well, this person is wonderful, and of course they wouldn't lead me wrong. Well, they don't know the big picture of that person's finances. And you may offer to use one of your sessions to meet together with other members of your client's money team. So, for example, it's not uncommon for me as someone's financial coach to use one of our sessions to meet and do a Zoom call with their financial planner. I just did that the other week with a single woman who's, going through some potential job changes. And, she was concerned about, being on track for retirement, and if she needed to pull from some of her after-tax assets, how was that going to affect things? And so, we had a Zoom call and we discussed it together. And I said, look, based off of her expenses, this is the number we're looking at. And so, if you're available to do that, to meet with, their attorney, their banker, their CPA, etc., that can help to coordinate. And if they look at you as that person that is the quarterback, so to speak, of their financial team, that's really the situation that you want to be in, where you are coordinating everything and making sure that they are being taken care of during this time. Now, the other thing that I do is I caution widowed clients against making major financial decisions or changes within the first 6 months of their spouse's death. My stepmom just passed away last month. And, my dad said, this house is too big for me. I don't know if I'm going to stay here. And I said, Dad, you know what? Let's not even think about that right now. During this first 6 months, it's your job to take care of yourself, and it's your job to grieve. And if we don't have to make a decision whether you're going to stay or, keep the house or sell the house, let's not do that. Why would we add more stress on top of that? We don't need to change everything all at once. And that's really what your client's job is. Now, there are probably going to be some money decisions and some things that are going to need to be handled. Um, there's some things that my dad's going to need to do relative to life insurance and settling my stepmom's estate and things of that nature. Yes, there are going to be some things like closing bank accounts, etc. But we're just going to handle the things that need to be handled within the next 6 months. We're not going to be making any major sweeping changes that we don't have to. So, if you are working with clients within the first 6 months after the death of their spouse, your main goal is really to help them get a handle on their financial big picture and to set up a simple system for them to manage their day-to-day finances if they haven't done that for themselves. So that may necessitate a referral out to a financial coach or a daily money manager. Now, the other mistake is some clients, they will want to make these big sweeping changes shortly after their spouse dies. And, I think my husband is probably going to be one of these people. Yeah, he basically said, if you die, I'm selling the house, because it would just remind me of you. So I certainly hope that my financial planner will talk him out of making some of these big changes. Because they may not want reminders of their spouse because it makes them sad. But this is part of the grieving process and it can't be ignored. And here's a great example. So I coached a woman who was in her early 50s who unexpectedly lost her husband. In the first session, my client said she wanted to sell the piece of land that she and her husband had intended to build their dream home on. And I advised her to wait because there was really no compelling reason, financially or otherwise, for her to do so. And I'm glad I convinced her to do that because a year later, she said, "Thank you so much for, talking me out of selling that property because I just sold it to my grown son and he is building his family's dream house there." So even though, the woman didn't build her dream house there, that land still stayed in the family. And, I think that was a cool way to honor her late husband. So, sometimes people see the death of a dream and, they just want to make these snap decisions. Now, on the flip side, some clients will resist making any changes at all, even a year or more later. They feel like selling the house or their spouse's possessions is a betrayal or an abandonment of the person. I experienced this when I started dating my husband. His best friend lost his father. I want to say he was probably a young teenager when he was like 13. So by the time I met him, he was almost 30. And, we were hanging out at his mom's house because they had a pool. And like when you walked inside his mom's house, it was like a time capsule from the 80s. Like they had kept like all of his father's stuff. They hadn't changed any of the decor in the house. They had kept all of his old cars, even though none of them were running. And, that is not healthy either. Your house should not turn into a museum to honor your former spouse. I mean, certainly there are some things that you're probably going to keep, but we don't want to get this frozen in time either. So usually once that 6-month mark hits, 0 to 6 months, we want to just handle the financial things that need to be handled. Then once that 6-month point hits, then we can start looking long term. And just keep that in mind when you are dealing with your clients who are widows, because neither of those extremes are healthy. And that's why it's absolutely vital, if you see your client in either of these situations, that you refer them out to get some mental health counseling. So as I said, we definitely want to have, whether you're dealing with someone divorce or widowhood, we want to have these personal finance resources, whether it's a book that you're going to refer them to, whether it's people you're going to refer them to, and with mental health professionals. These can actually be wonderful referral partners for you. So that is the end of our presentation. I hope you learned some wonderful things. And actually, you have experienced one of the 6 modules in my Foundations of Financial Dignity course. And this is a course that really covers all of the areas of personal finance, spending, saving, investing, debt, money and relationships, and will give you insight into your clients' behaviors in all of these different areas. You have experienced one of the 6 trainings, so there's 5.5 additional hours of training packed into the course, in addition to 6 PDF reference guides that cover the 47 emotional money tools within the course.
One second, Christine. I want to tell everybody that's on the call live right now, stay on until the end because we might throw a little surprise at you, right?
Oh, we are throwing a surprise at you. I'm getting ready to put it in the chat box here in a second. So there's $2,000 of value in this course, and I don't charge that. I charge $397 for this course, but because you have attended, whether you're attending live or on the replay, you're going to get $100 off. Now, those of you who are live, we are actually going to put in the chat box, at least I'm going to attempt that here. I'm going to put a promo code in here, and this is going to give you an additional discount. So you're going to want to write this down.
Send it to me too so I can make sure that it went out. So.
Okay.
And by the way, I've sent a lot of people to these courses and they've all raved about them, Christine. So it's very, very good. And you can position yourself. You can use this to market better and just get better at the clients you already have. Just get better at helping them.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, for the people who finish the course, they finish all the modules, they're part of the financial dignity movement, and they actually get this badge that they can put on their website, on their social media profiles. And this just basically means you're serving your clients at a higher level. You're a heart-centered financial professional. You don't just care about your clients' money, you care about them as a person. And that is the best way to get referrals. If your clients know that you really care about them and you're not just in it for the money, then you don't even have to ask them for referrals. They're going to send them to you. I can promise you. I've seen this happen with so many people. All right.
Do we have time, by the way, for a quick question?
We do have time for questions.
This is a really interesting, actually, one, because I've wondered this myself. This is from James, and James says that I've, counseled a couple for a number of years, and I was really proactive in getting them to make their financial decisions together, so I often had them in the office. Now that they're separating, they're sort of fighting over me, which one is going to get me as their advisor. And I know that people Christine, have different divorce lawyers. What happens in a case where they're sort of like, I want to stay with James? And
yeah, well, and here's the thing, I would reach out to them, as a couple and say, I am comfortable working with each of you individually if you are comfortable with that. I am not going to go behind either of yours back and tell the other person like, oh my gosh, you won't believe what Susie's doing with her money, blah, 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 and just reinforce the fact that, hey, client confidentiality, now that you're going to be, 2 separate clients instead of one unit, I am mature enough and, professional enough to be able to advise each of you individually if you're comfortable with that. If you're not comfortable with that, I would have somebody within your firm that you are ready to refer them to, so that you are basically keeping that client. At least their assets will still be
In the
within your
family.
firm.
In the
Yes,
family.
absolutely.
Perfect.
And I think that's
And
awesome that they're fighting over you. I mean, you are obviously doing something right, James.
well, yeah, I mean, I think that's great too. And I've had people tell me that about other professionals. Everything from the pool cleaning person to you get somebody that you like. It's like a hairdresser, Christine. You get someone you
It
like, you
is.
want to keep them, right? So,
Exactly.
unfortunately, we're at the 11 o'clock mark, and I promised all you guys it would be an hour, and I'm sorry. If you have other questions, though, Christine, where can they reach out to you?
Sure. They can connect with me directly on my website, which is my name, christine-luken.com, or they can email me. My email address is easy to remember. It's christine@christine-luken.com.
Perfect. So if you have other questions, reach out to Christine. I encourage you, if you really want a great tool to get into this course, the purpose of this was not to sell the course, but I just think it's so fantastic when my agents and advisors want to help women. And we really do need and value your help. Believe it or not, as much as we fight you, we still appreciate good financial advice. So I want to thank Christine Luken for being our guest today. And just again, reach out to her, look for her on LinkedIn, look for her, connect with her. She's a fount of wisdom. Unfortunately for her, she found it the hard way, but but
It makes me
it's
more
good.
relatable, Tammy. I've been
That's
there.
right.
I've done that. I'm
Yeah,
not going to judge you.
I'll tell you, almost every woman I know has had at least one of these kind of relationship issues. And you as advisors, the last thing I want to leave you with is you have some ability to see this coming. You know what I mean? If you're working really closely with your clients and you get to know them, and maybe you can be preemptive in some cases so that some of these things don't get out of control. So thank you all for being here. If you want to reach out to me, my name is Tammy de Leeuw. You can find me at yourmarketingtherapist.com. Thanks, Christine, and we
Thank
will talk
you.
later. Take care.
All
Bye-bye.
righty.